Hello, welcome everyone. I am Briar Harvey. This is the Neurodiversity Media Network. We are here today with the fabulous Melissa Cox for another Southern favorite of Movies and Munchies. So today we're going to be talking about fried green tomatoes. We're going to be discussing how to make fried green tomatoes because
Mhm.
I don't think any truly Southern diet is complete without fried green tomatoes.
They're delicious.
We're also going to discuss long pork, I suppose. And really, this is. So I watched the movie again this morning because that's kind of what I do. When I do a movie review, I watch it the morning of so that I can actually remember shit because I have the memory of an Apple IIe and it's not going to stick around, not even overnight. If I sleep on it, I forget. So Um, this one's good, and I think this is going to be a fun conversation.
Yeah.
So let's start. Um, this movie was made in 1991. It had a budget of 11 million and a box office take of 119 million, which
It's
by
good.
all accounts is a commercial success. It wasn't a big one, but it wasn't I don't think this was not a theater movie.
Yeah.
It certainly lived on in the home though, right? Like for years and years and years. Again, this may very well be a very southern tradition because I don't know if everyone watches this movie the way that we watched this movie, but like all the time. All the time.
Every time it came on TV,
Mhm.
again, I grew up watch. So, again, part of the reason this podcast exists is because I grew up watching TBS and TNT, any station that had um movies, and I would just watch them. I was like, I, I didn't at that point have an issue. I know a lot of people have an issue if they start a movie in the middle. I didn't, so I would just watch whatever was on. I much preferred movies to TV shows, so and that was my hyperfixation before I knew that I was autistic um, and ADHD, and I know a lot about movies. So
And the thing is that it was the 90s. So it's not like you could rewind it and start over or like
you had
we
to jump
s-
over the back of the couch so that you could go to the bathroom and then get back to the couch before the commercial break was over.
correct. Like we still make jokes in this house in the year of our Lord 2023 about TBS time
Yeah.
being 5 minutes later, right? Like that was what we did.
Yeah.
We we watched these movies. Yeah, our kids don't know any of these things, Lorraine says, and she is correct.
I don't understand. I know I do, but also when things go off of whatever streaming platform they're on occasionally, and the kids are like, but how am I going to watch it? I'm like, I mean, that's just the way things work sometimes. I had to wait half a year or more for my favorite things to come back.
Do you remember the wait time between movies and then HBO and then cable? Like, it could be a year to 18 months before a movie would filter from the theater into the TV to be watchable.
And
And now it's 2 weeks. The
we just watched Super Mario, and an amazing movie in the theaters. And our kids, because I have a 7-year old who's obsessed with Nintendo, anything Nintendo, but it was 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks later, and all of a sudden we have bought it because of course we bought it as soon as it came out.
I, you know, it's the turnover time, the lack of waiting is quite a thing, is it not?
Yeah,
All right,
it makes it difficult to impose any sort of like not self control. There's a word that I can't think of,
but
but
I
yeah,
know what you're saying. Like there's
like
some anticipatory wait thing.
yes, and it makes it better. Like that, I think that's as a kid, that's probably why I didn't like TV shows as much as I liked movies because movies, that's a complete story. That's all
Mhm.
the story that you're going to get, and then it's over. You don't have to wait for the story to finish. But TV shows, you did have to wait, right? Like, and these days people tend to like TV shows because you get more bang for your buck. Because you can just binge all of
I
it.
really do think of many TV shows now as 8 to 20-hour movies, right? Like
It absolutely, it's people want the longer form, and for a lot of stories that's amazing. Like it's amazing because some of these stories, had they been done like when we were growing up, like it wouldn't have been doable. It just wouldn't have been that good. They would have had to cut so much. But people tend to like TV shows now because you get all of it in one big chunk. And yeah, maybe you have to wait like Stranger Things or something. You have to wait for a year or two before you get more, but you still got like 10 episodes or
right.
so, an hour-long show. And I think like at the same time, like that built-in necessity of waiting is something I really miss. Like I remember hearing a podcast years ago about this like very issue of like there's so much out there that you can't watch everything. Like you can't watch everything, you can't read everything. You have to choose. You have to be very discerning about what you actually want to engage with. So just because something is popular does not mean that you're gonna watch it. Whereas when I was growing up, like I remember people talking about West Wing, which is wonderful, but like everybody watched it, or everybody like there were these.
Appointment television.
Yeah.
You were talking about appointment television, something that I have tried to bring back into my life. So I've won Star Trek, obviously. Strange New Worlds now comes out on Thursday. Before it was Picard, but that was also on Thursday.
Yeah.
However, it dumps Thursday like at 2 or 3 a.m. So my appointment television
Yeah.
now is Thursday morning when I wake up. I'm pulling out my tablet because I'm certainly not watching this on TVs and I don't have a TV in my bedroom. I'm pulling out my little tiny screen to make my appointment television at
Mhm.
10 a.m. on a Thursday morning. And recently I tried to bring this back. Like, I made myself a list of on
Yeah.
Monday, I'm going to watch an episode of this show. On Tuesday, I'm going to watch an episode of this show. It totally did not work. And I really like,
I
I feel
think it's
like
perfect
there's a
for
bit of
though,
a loss.
because like I have absolutely done the same thing. And also because I love movies, because I still love movies, and you do have to be so discerning. Like I haven't made one this year or last year. Like the pandemic just kind of like made everything go wonky, I feel like, because I had more time to watch things. And also time became very ephemeral. Um,
That's for sure.
so I didn't do this, but for many years I have gone in my journal and written down movies and TV shows that I am working on and want to finish, or movies that I want to watch, right? Because I also know me, and I know that I have to balance, like I enjoy like dark, like dramatic movies and stuff, and I also enjoy an occasional documentary. Like I enjoy those more than I used to. um but I know me, and I have to balance that with comedies and absolute garbage.
Right. Because binge watching an the season of Better Call Saul or Shiny Happy People does
Oh my
not,
god, I
in
spit it.
fact, make me happy. Like, and these are things that I want to watch,
Yeah,
absolutely. But they are darker, and I really have to balance that out with something that's a
something
little
like
lighter, right?
they take away the hope for the world. They take away my hope, so I have to have something that brings that hope back, like What We Do in the Shadows, or which is coming back soon. Oh my god, if you've never seen What We Do in the
No,
Shadows,
that one's not on. I will
oh my,
literally put that on my list right now.
okay. Yeah, What We Do in the Shadows is The Office, but make it vampires who are really, really dumb. Like, they're just real dumb, and it's amazing. What We Do in the Shadows. What else? I usually Abbott Elementary is really enjoyable. Also, that one's very light,
So,
but
okay,
yes,
the movie. We were
the movie.
talking about a movie.
Yes, we are.
This is so fun. Okay, I'm reading the Chat GPT movie summary. Well, not all of it because it's pretty long.
Oh,
Uh,
so I asked my spouse what he because he had seen this really long time ago, and I wanted to know like what like he was like okay I think it's about two women who own a restaurant. There might be one bed, uh, only one bed, and there may or may not have been cannibalism. So that was the summary from him before we rewatched it.
well, thank God he's not writing movie reviews. Is all we're saying. Okay. Directed by John Avney and based on the novel by Fanny Flagg, which I have still never read.
I haven't either. I have read her cookbook, or not
Huh?
her cookbook, probably. I don't think she wrote it, but the Whistle Stop Cafe cookbook.
Right. So the film primarily takes place in Whistle Stop, Alabama during the 1920s and the 1980s.
Mhm.
The story begins with a disillusioned housewife, Evelyn Couch, played by Kathy Bates, who befriends an elderly woman named Ninny Threadgood, played by Jessica Tandy, at a nursing home. As Ninny begins to share her life experiences with Evelyn, the narrative transitions to the past, highlighting oh Jesus, Chat
A
BT, this
lot.
is terrible. Uh there's no
This is a fourth
person,
grade summary.
right, there's no personality here whatsoever. The first story follows the adventures of Iggy, played by Mary Stuart Masterson, who was great,
Absolutely phenomenal.
and Ruth Jameson, played by Mary Louise Parker, also incredible. And I think the acting here is part of what makes this film so remarkable.
Yeah,
Who I don't know, uh are their love and support for each other are further tested when Ruth marries an abusive man, Frank Bennett, played by Nick Searcy, who I have never been able to see as anything other than Frank Bennett ever.
that was
Um,
an unfortunate role for him.
there are certain people who just get pigeonholed into terrible people.
Yeah.
And then, unfortunately, I frequently learn later that they just are terrible people. So,
Yeah.
it's an interesting thing. And this is again why we frequently don't talk about the actors in these movies.
Yep.
So I like how it doesn't spoil Buddy's death.
Yeah. That is.
Although,
Although we're doing it right now because I mean, y'all. It's
This movie is 40 years old, 30 years old. I'm sorry.
no,
Only 30 years old.
acceptable. I don't like that.
And back in the present day, Evelyn gains inspiration from Ninny's tales and embarks on a personal journey of self discovery and empowerment. I mean, that's one way to put it. She finds the courage to stand up against her domineering husband, and I don't think that's I don't think her husband's bad. I just think he's pretty typical uh sports ball fan, right? Ed? Ed's not a bad guy. He's just a sports guy who doesn't have
Just,
any
yeah,
understanding of his life or his wife or his marriage.
he has no, yeah, he just has no interest in like doing anything aside from disassociating into a sports game of
Mhm.
any kind.
You know,
I think she is a product of her society, and
absolutely.
as is he. And it's just that nobody ever expected anything of him other than that. And she never expected anything of herself until she realized how unhappy she was.
I think Evelyn's story is a really great representation. I mean, really, all the way through of how empowerment is sold to women. So, first we start with the seminars, right? And she's going to classes to improve her marriage as though she is, in fact, the problem.
Yeah, as though she can do it all by herself.
Hmm.
And then, the suggestion of, wrap yourself in saran wrap and wait for him to come home. Just what were we telling women in the 1980s?
I liked her. I liked her. I didn't realize until this morning, like at 40 years old, that that scene didn't actually happen. She was just imagining what would happen
Yeah.
if she wrapped herself in saran wrap. But in fact, that is what would have happened if she had wrapped herself in saran wrap.
I mean, yeah, that's a given. Okay, so this takes place in the 80s. If it had happened, 50 years prior to that, and saran wrap, we're taking all of those things for granted that it existed and everything. But had she done that, he immediately would have checked her in to a mental institution for hysteria. Um, yeah.
So then next, Evelyn decides she needs a job,
Mhm.
which I, I'd forgotten this, but the
Yeah.
job is Mary Kay. She literally joins an MLM.
Yeah, because that was the option.
Uh-huh.
Like, I mean, for a stay-at-home mom, because with her kid grown, and I don't know if we ever see if she has like any sort of education beyond high school. Probably not. She's been
She
at home.
might have gone to college to get her Mrs. degree.
She probably, yeah, but who knows like what that actually provides for her. And also, it's been 18 years at least since then. And even like as a a stay-at-home parent today, I still feel like I don't remember anything from my actual person, human being time of like learning stuff before I had kids and had to take all of my brain power and take care of them every single day.
So, what we're left with for many women is an MLM. And if you haven't read it, I talked about this over the weekend, but I strongly encourage folks to read Hey Hun by Emily Lynn Paulson. Uh, it's ostensibly about MLMs. It's also about the patriarchy and white supremacy and how all of those things come into play inside those organizations. and how middle class, stay at home, mostly white women reinforce those stereotypes through their MLMs. And really, it all started. I mean, the granddaddy is Amway, but in the 80s in particular, when you and I were growing up, it was Tupperware and it was Mary Kay, and my mom did both.
I don't think my mom ever did either. But she was like she had an actual like a small business. So she was busy doing that. But that was also like she also had many friends who did do that. And I remember like being at parties, like being at like Mary Kay, Avon parties, getting those little like magazines of Avon. Um, I don't remember Mary Kay having magazines, but Avon definitely.
No, Avon was much cooler for the younger set, right? Mary Kay was for our mothers.
Yeah.
Avon was in fact there were older like verticals, but like truly nothing cooler than the little tiny Avon magazines that you would flip through. God, I really feel like I'm dating myself here.
Well, and then also like Avon and Mary Kay both had like the itty bitty little lipsticks, and those were my favorite. I like that was like the only reason that I wanted to go to any of those parties is because I just wanted the itty bitty little lipsticks.
The little bitty itty bitty lipsticks, the little bitty perfumes, right? And at one point in time, shortly before my parents divorced, we had an entire shed full of Tupperware boxes and Mary Kay products. And there were many things wrong in my parents' marriage, but knowing what I know now about MLMs and about how that works, I do have to wonder, looking back now, if that was a factor and if the way that MLMs were propagated to my mother, who died of alcoholism and drug addiction and never really got to be like a whole person again after she had children. Like that was just gone. It went away. She never got it back. And so she drank herself to death instead. And that's what was available to women in the 80s. That was it. Your
Yep.
mom had a small business of her own, and it's so interesting still to me how MLM folks will try and talk about having small businesses,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean that was because my grandparents owned an antique store, and so when my grandmother passed away, my mom inherited enough to invest in a piece of land where they built a flea market. And like my dad had already owned like pawn shops at that point, so it was like sort of a natural progression. Um, but so that was like a family situation. It's still there in Mississippi, but it's yeah, like the I will say like Tupperware, I have like a soft spot in my heart for Tupperware though. I wouldn't want to sell it, but I will occasionally still buy it, even though I feel kind of bad because I'm like, I don't want to support an MLM, but also I do
It's
like
still the only one that I will, the only one. You gotta
Tupperware.
burp it like
It's
Tupperware.
just good. It's actually good stuff.
It is.
Like my mom still has like the canisters for flour and sugar and whatnot, and she has like several other things like bowls with the plastic lids and stuff. Like they're pretty decent. It's the only MLM that I will still occasionally buy, though I still think, all MLMs are a little bit evil.
You know, I definitely don't. Some other day, we will do a deep dive into MLMs because I think it's actually really a conversation worth having. but it just is so emblematic here in this film about the options that were available to
Yep.
women at that time in order to create their own income. There were so few options, and the reality is that there still aren't that many now. When we look at the number of women who dropped out of the workforce during and after the pandemic because they didn't have adequate child care,
Yep.
right? And we're not having a real conversation about the impact of this or what it means or how we actually change these things from an institutional standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I have no idea how to. That's like a bigger question than I am ready to answer. But I mean, I do know so many friends who are either like now like maybe they worked from home a little bit before, but now they are completely work from home, or they just had to quit their job, and we all have to figure out how to make that work. Or just so many things, or like all of those back alley like um dark money babysitters and daycares that pop up, and then the terrifying part of that where it might be fine or it might be
It
super,
might not be.
because those people aren't licensed, and you're just trusting that your children are taken care of. um yeah, it's definitely changed a lot of things, and um yeah, it's I also know a lot of people, because military spouse, like, it's rampant. Like,
Hmm.
MLMs are rampant
Hmm.
in military, because you move around every couple of years, and you don't have a chance. Like, military spouses are actually extremely well educated, like, statistically very well educated. But when you move around every couple of years, you
No one
don't
wants to hire you.
no. And there are programs where the military is like, look, like, legally, it's sort of how legally a place can't refuse to hire you if you're pregnant, but like they can find another reason.
Hmm.
They can always find some other reason that you're just not a good fit. So it might not be because you're a military spouse, but there's just something else.
And unfortunately, that leaves them with very few options. So we come back to over and over and over again agency. And
Yeah.
I kind of think that's what this movie is about. It's about two women, Evelyn and Iggy,
Yep.
demonstrating agency.
Yep. Um, yeah, they Iggy is she was like my hero as a kid. Absolutely my hero. I wasn't much of like an outdoor kid, but just that sense of freedom that Iggy portrays, like, I wanted that. I wanted to be that. Iggy and Pippi Longstockings were my favorites, because I just wanted to be who I was and not have to fit into anyone else's idea.
It was a really strong, powerful representation for me because of that. And because, God, I look back and go, oh, well, that explains so much, right? Now that I am diagnosed, now that I know that I am autistic,
Yep.
and there weren't many female representations of moving to the beat of your own drum for
Yep.
us at that time. And Iggy Threadgood certainly was.
Yep.
So I think that there is hope here. And that's important. The Iggy's story and what happens there, we've at least come away from that, right?
Yeah, I mean, some of it. um, Iggy, I mean, yeah, like, so if you are, gay and do not want to get married to a person of the opposite gender or at all, you have more options for now. Um, but there's also, I mean, there's Ruth, and that story is unfortunately like still very applicable, um, to an extent, like just the sort of impossibility of like, why didn't she leave? Well, how was she going to leave? Um,
Even now, leaving is hard. Uh, the average number of times that a battered partner leaves is 5. And the resources available, whether the battered partner is male or female, and honestly, if the battered partner is male, the resources are worse,
yeah,
right?
yeah, because then there's not even shelters that will
That's
take.
correct. That's correct. I think there's 1, maybe 2 in the entire United States. Like, this is,
Yeah,
and intimate partner violence is especially prevalent in the LGBT community, right? And so we're not saying it's women beating men, although that does absolutely happen, but men can't even flee men.
yeah,
This is, and we don't have an infrastructure for this. We don't have support for this. I have someone I know going through this right now. Um, she made calls. They were not helpful. She is not in a situation where she needs a shelter, but she still needs an attorney and support, right? And they're like, well, you can call back next month when our our legal aid person is in the office, because they only come into the office once a month. And what are you supposed to do in an
in the,
emergency?
yeah,
We know, statistically speaking, that police are incredibly ineffective in domestic disputes.
yeah,
There are a number of states where if there is an allegation of violence, everyone gets arrested. So, that's
yep.
helpful.
Means that you then end up with a police record, which makes it, other things harder in the future, like getting a job that pays well enough to support yourself or to get a lease at certain places. Because again, that question of, um, well, it's not like legally, people might not be able to deny you, but there's a lot that goes unspoken, and people will still deny people for things they're not legally allowed to.
I think so much of what we learn from films like this as children were the unspoken rules.
Yeah.
For better or for ill, movies like this really helped me navigate the ways in which people mistreat each other and how little help there truly actually is. You got your village, and that's what you've got, right?
Yeah. And you have your village so long as you fit into a mold of what your village wants. Um, so your village might get smaller and smaller depending on how much of an outlier you are. Um, I will say, I mean, I think like at least part of the reason I loved movies so much as a kid was because it did teach me all of those things. It taught me how to social. It like I didn't understand how to social with other people, but it's also why like it taught me how to social but in an adult way. So again, I was always like better at socializing with adults as a child than I was with other kids because the only like representation you get of kids interacting with other kids are like on Disney where they are overacting a lot and you're just like okay, well, I don't that doesn't seem to work to like get friends. So but yeah,
And I really question too the this movie was probably fine. There were a lot of films that we were exposed to as children, like, especially in the early because you had 5 channels, right? You had the big 3, PBS, and HBO if you paid for it or if you stole it. Those were your options.
we just had cable. So it was like whatever was on cable.
I mean, and truly, I'm clearly a little bit older than you because I remember when cable was fucking amazing,
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. I have a hair. It's very bothersome.
But yeah, I mean cable and I was definitely like privileged in that like I had cable because like obviously that was still like a pretty decent privilege.
And there is there's a lot here about the ways in which we build communities. So, what did you learn about cultivating community from this movie?
From this movie. Like a lot of the same things that especially like the last couple of years that I've been trying to practice more opening up about struggles because we can't receive help if we don't ask for it, right?
Mhm.
Which is incredibly difficult and vulnerable and like scary because on the flip side of that, we know that we still might not receive help even if we ask for it. Because sometimes circumstances, other people in our lives, they just can't show up for us. And it just happens. Um, but it's like making that net wide enough to be able to have somebody there to catch us when we need, and we can catch other people when they need. Um, which is like the hardest thing, right? Is to know how wide your net needs to be. My net is incredibly important for a lot of mental health reasons, addiction, stuff. Like, I need to make sure that I have a lot of people that I can call on because I know that I am not always available to help somebody. Um, Depending on my own mental health or just life. Like life is just busy sometimes, and I can't always be on the other end to talk you through a panic attack that I love you and I want to talk you through, but I can't always be there. Um, and we get so isolated. So it's making sure that I keep reaching out, even when I don't want to reach out, and working through those traumas, those trust issues of like childhood where I did tell people and they didn't listen and they didn't hear how much I was struggling. So I just learned to keep it all inside. Um, but I just kind of acknowledge that and like keep reaching out to people anyway. But yeah, community, having a couple of core people is super important. Um, but then you see how you build a space for community too. Like I intentionally, as hard as it is sometimes, because I am introverted, I am autistic, inviting people into my home has always been a helpful way for me to build my community, my net, um, because mm, I can take care of you better here. Like, I can take care of you here. And I want you to know what it's like so that if you need to, you can come here and I can make you a cup of coffee or tea or bake you some muffins or something. I am very like hearthy. I am very much everybody's mom. Like all of my friends' mom. If you come here, I'm going to make sure that you know where everything is in my house. And then after like the second time you're here, you already know. So go and get a cup if you want a cup. Like I'm gonna fix it for you for the first couple times, then you can go deal with it. Because this is your house now as well.
For me, it's about the community of misfit toys. Like Smokey, the alcoholic, we got
Yeah,
Big George, the black people in town. Like Iggy built her village very literally from people who were outcasts everywhere else.
yep,
And that's always felt significant to me, that we don't throw people away,
yeah,
and that sometimes we have to look for what's redeemable, but if we do, it's there.
yeah. I mean, the she refuses to give up her community in the face of violence, in the face of like threats and the clan coming after all of them. Um, and then she also makes sure that her people know what her values are and that they need to stay in line with those values. Like I know like she tells what's his name? The big guy, the sheriff. She basically like tells him like, look, I know that you have been out there too with the clan and I'm going to need you to come back and remember that you can be a decent person, but you have to make a choice. You have to choose to be a decent person.
I think he does, because when Frank shows up in his white sheet, he in fact is not there.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's like an interesting part of the story too, because they're like, you boys aren't from around here. And you see that moment of like, oh, these people who hate these other people don't have a problem hurting us as well because they hate these other people. Like we didn't necessarily do anything. Like he's in the clan in his area and yet they're still willing to attack him because he's not part of their tribe, right? Like he's not part of their community. It's just that like recognizing how quickly those hateful people will turn on you when you just disagree a little bit, when it's not your house.
And when we talk about the concept of tribalism, it's really important to dig into what makes those communities, because unlike building your village, tribalism involves often hate and violence. So the people who get sucked into those groups do so by degrees until they are so far in that it's a sunk cost fallacy for them at that point in time. They've been in it for so long, there's no getting out, and so very few of them do.
Well, and it's cult mentality at that point too. It's very difficult because it's whenever I hear people like say something like, "Well, I just don't understand how they," it's it's the same thing as the reason that you stay in an abusive situation, right? It's why wouldn't they leave? It's like, okay, what were their other options? Yes, they did have other options, but like, did they know? And I'm not like excusing any of that. I'm not excusing them being like evil and hateful and committing acts that are terrible, but also like making those people aware of their options. Like we just mentioned Shiny Happy People, and I just finished that like yesterday. I've kept up with those stories for like a long time, all of those stories, because I have personally interacted with some groups like that as a child. Um, just
I don't
living,
think you can grow up in the South without knowing your
yeah,
local revivalist, Christian, quiverful congregation. Like, we all just kind of
yeah.
know these people.
And that's the, for me, that's the epitome of what a church offers is a community. It's a ready set community that you don't have to go out and find for yourself. You just get to come on in and be brought into the community, and now you have the things that every human being needs, which is other people to help you with your kids, other people to talk about, like, how did you deal with this situation with your kids? Because as soon as you have kids, and even without, obviously, like, you still need your community. But, like, for me, that was definitely when community fell apart, is when I had kids. And suddenly, I didn't have anybody. Once we moved away from any family, I was all on my own, dealing with, small babies and zero breaks. And a church gives you breaks, and it gives you other people who can tell you, okay, well, this is how you do it. You don't have to read a bunch of books. You don't have to question yourself constantly. This is how you do it. This is how you raise a baby. And if you're in a weak position and you are exhausted and you are depressed, you're like, okay, yeah, let's try that. So it's the same thing with, those communities that have a even more nefarious purpose. Um, they're like, you don't necessarily go in expecting to rally against a group that, because you don't really maybe have strong feelings about a people of a different skin color, or a people of a different like ethnic background, or any of those things, but you just wanted some people around you. And these other people have strong feelings, and at first you're like, I mean, that's fine, I don't know, yeah, everybody has their opinions. And then eventually you're like, well, if I don't agree with them, then I'm not going to be included anymore, and I lose my
And I
community.
lose this support. I encourage folks to read Cultish by Amanda Montell. There's also a podcast called
The cult.
Sounds Like a Cult. And really, they've done some really interesting deep dives into communities that you would not think of as cults. That, in fact, once you pull back the shiny layers, you're like, oh, wow, this is a cult.
Yep.
Bikram yoga, sure, I can accept that that's a cult. The NFL did not think so until
I
they
mean,
unpicked the behavior. And I was like, holy shit. Now, that one was, it's not cultish for the fans. It's fine for the fans. But if you are an NFL player, it is absolutely 100% a cult.
yep.
Shocking. And the thing is that these communities develop because we have no social infrastructure. So we're forced to build these things for ourselves. And
Hmm.
when we are forced to build them for ourselves, it becomes very easy to overlook bad behavior.
Yep. When your basic needs are not met, you don't have time or
Mhm.
energy to think about like ethical and moral quandaries as intensely as you maybe should.
So now, this is absolutely not where I thought we were going to go with this episode.
It's it's okay.
But this has been fabulous. And really, I think not an inaccurate view at some of the undertones of this film. So let's get to the food.
Yes. Let me pull up my recipe. It's a really pretty basic recipe for fried green tomatoes. If you've ever fried anything, it's so I struggle with writing down my recipes because I'm like, well, this is just really basic, right?
Mhm.
But sometimes we need really basic. And then I forget that I have, personally looked up like 10 different recipes and fiddled with them until I actually ended up with something that I liked, right? Because that's how it works. Um, that's why people think they can't cook because they just haven't had the energy or like the desire to sit around and mess with a recipe for a couple different tries and accept that maybe tonight dinner is not going to be edible.
Right. And I think that's part of the process that so my oldest is 22 and we've been working with her on cooking for a long time
Yeah.
because she's autistic. She has very specific food preferences. Cooking is hard.
Yep.
But she really struggles with the idea that it's okay to fail even though it's food. Like it's okay to make something that turns out badly because
Yeah,
that's how we learn.
it is. And I mean, there's like a whole privilege discussion there for like how unpacking some of that like stuff that I'm pretty sure for me it's like ancestral because I never really in my memory like we ate a lot of beans and rice when I was really little. But after that we pretty much I never wanted for food. So it's got to be like ancestral trauma or something, but it's that um need to not waste. Like I need to not waste. And it's like, okay, what's going to happen? Like what's going to happen if I have to throw this away? And depending on how your economic circumstances are now, like it might be a catastrophe. It might. But then you make your safe foods that you know how to make every single time. But so
Also, if you have the budget, I deeply encourage a Lomi composter. This is on my note, but it's this teeny tiny composter that sits on your fucking kitchen counter and you put your food scraps in it and it gives you dirt. It's like $500. It's kind of like not been in my budget recently, but it's on the wish list because dirt.
it is
Who
it is
who
also
doesn't
on
need
this
dirt?
list. But I also have like a composter outside the ones that sit up and turn so they're anaerobic so they don't
Mhm.
smell. And that one was not $500. It was still
No.
an investment, but and again, like the more uh there's a whole discussion about how it takes money to save money. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I remember reading a book my freshman year in college, Nickel and Dimed, and
Barbara Ehrenreich. That is a classic that everyone should read.
it's so good. It's such a good book about just how she does this social experiment and she basically starts with nothing as though, she were maybe coming out of a domestic violence situation or some other like situation where she doesn't have any resources and she has to start fresh for everything, and she realizes like all the little things that add up, and making it on a minimum wage job or even two minimum wage jobs is just it's impossible. um but yeah, fantastic book about all the little costs that sneak up on you to be able to
Mhm.
save money.
Yeah, poverty is expensive. And I think that's a thing that people who have not lived in poverty for any extended length of time truly understand. There is always an emergency or a setback
Yep.
that costs everything.
Yeah, because you don't have the money to do maintenance,
Hmm.
so you end up dealing with the worst case scenario at
Hmm.
the end of the day. Um, like, I mean, yeah, health insurance, auto insurance, like all of those things. Okay, so fried green tomatoes. If you do not, okay, so I was talking to a friend, and she could not find she could not find green tomatoes anywhere.
Hmm.
Um, because it really depends on where you are in the country or world, whether you can access green tomatoes.
I live
And,
in Omaha, Nebraska, and could not walk into a store here and buy green tomatoes.
yeah. Um, so another option that is also delicious is pickles,
Hmm.
if you like fried pickles, um, or zucchini even. You can fry some zucchini or asparagus. Definitely a very different flavor than green tomatoes because green tomatoes are like, I love them. They are like a summertime treat because I do not fry things very often because now my house smells like fry oil. Um, so when I do fry things, I fry everything. Like I fry like all of the things that I have been wanting for 6 months today, like on the day that I fry things. So I usually fry pickles and shrimp and green tomatoes. Um, but pickles are a good substitute if you can't find green tomatoes. Maybe you have a friend who's growing them and they can set aside a couple for you if their garden is doing pretty all right. But you're basically just going to dredge them in, you slice them into quarter-inch slices, dredge them in a flour and spice mixture. I like Cavender's Greek seasoning as my like go-to all-purpose seasoning. I could tell you how to make an all-purpose seasoning, but like I'm not gonna right now.
We use Nature's Own, which is, I think this is probably regional and family favorites because we've also used Cavender's, but no.
Yeah. It's just easier. Again, it's like if you really want to be really crunchy and make it all yourself, you can. I have done that. It's not worthwhile. It's like making brownie mix. Like I don't care. They have done tests and it's effectively the same. I am a pastry chef and I endorse buying a
Brownie mix.
brownie mix. Like I don't want to deal with it.
Also, as a baker, right, I can tell the difference between a boxed cake and a made from scratch cake. Brownies, no. And truly, especially if you have to eat gluten free, like I
Yeah.
have to eat, please just buy the box.
It's
It's
too much work.
too much.
Gluten free is like I don't think people understand the chemistry gets so much more complicated. It's
It's
no
true.
longer like stuff you can kind of play around with. Like with regular baking, I can kind of play. I do not know enough about the chemistry of gluten free to play with it. I have to find a well tested recipe if I need to make something gluten free.
It's a lot of work, and it makes cooking, I gotta be honest, less fun.
Yeah.
Although at least here I do like Bob's Red, whatever
Yeah.
that name brand name is. But
Yeah.
there's a 1-to-1 gluten-free flour replacement. It's my favorite in terms of just general all-purpose gluten-free flour, and it'll do the job here.
Yeah. I hear also really good things about King Arthur,
Yes,
because they're just honestly like if you talk to a professional baker, they're like King Arthur is the shit. Like
that's
it
correct.
it has been the shit for years. It just keeps doing a really good job at what it does.
It's the only bread flour that I would ever bake with commercially is King Arthur.
Yeah, it's just consistent. It is always consistent. And that is worth its weight in gold if you are baking big batches of stuff where you don't want to waste like 50 pounds of a product because it didn't quite turn out right.
So we dredge them in flour with
You
all
dredge the
purpose.
flour and, yeah, all purpose flour and spice mixture, and then an egg wash. And then you do cornmeal for the last like dredge, and then you fry it in oil. Um, I do like medium hot. I don't do a temperature on mine because I just am real loosey goosey. I don't.
The problem with Southern cooking is that we don't have recipes because we learned at a very small age. Oh, I don't know. You just kind of shake it in there.
Just
My
feel with it. It's like how I'm describing how to make biscuits. Well, I mean, you work the shortening in until it kind of feels like
a
this.
biscuit,
Like
right?
it just feels like it. You can grab it and it doesn't fall apart immediately. um, but yeah, so you dredge it. You do your flour, egg, cornmeal mix, and then I do. I think I used I put down 24 ounces of oil in a pan, so that it's completely covered basically when you're deep frying it. And yeah, until it's golden brown. It only takes like 2 to 4 minutes on each side, on depending on how hot your oil is. You don't want your oil to brown it too quickly, so you just kind of have to play around with it when you fry stuff, which I understand. People get kind of nervous about frying, and you just have to experiment, and it takes practice. It just takes practice. I did try air frying this, and I would not recommend it
Well, that's a bummer. The air fryer is good for so many things,
at
but I
all.
am not shocked. It was a texture problem, wasn't it?
Was a texture problem. I don't like it.
Hmm.
I would just recommend, biting the bullet, go and get your oil and just fry everything that you want to fry for the next 6 months.
Because, and this is incredibly valid. There's something about cooking a fried green tomato that it cooks it and also leaves it, I mean, intact, more or less.
That is the most difficult thing. Is I do want to say, do not try this if you can't find green tomatoes. Don't try it with red tomatoes. Please
Oh,
don't do
please
that.
don't do that to yourself. It'll
If you
be
ever,
terrible and you'll be sorry.
it's a bad idea. Um, because the thing about green tomatoes is they are sour and they are firm. And so you cannot get that firmness from a red tomato because it's ripe. So it's going to be softer. That's what we love about ripe tomatoes. And a green tomato will make your stomach hurt if you eat it raw. It will make your stomach hurt if you eat enough fried green tomatoes too, but it will make your stomach hurt less because it's been cooked. Yeah. So make sure also when you take them out of the fry oil, put them on a paper towel and salt them immediately.
Hmm.
Always salt your fried food when it comes out of the oil immediately, because even though you have put salt into the mixture, there is nothing that can replace salting your food as soon as it comes out of the fry oil.
I feel like there's actual science here.
I'm pretty sure there is. I didn't look up the science on that. I am a science food nerd sometimes, but I didn't look it up on this.
No, but I feel like there's something here about the temperature of the oil cooks the salt out, and so you have to add it back in afterwards.
Probably. Yeah, that makes sense.
That food chemistry, y'all. It's so much fun.
Super cool. And then I also made a remoulade sauce recipe
Mm.
for this. And like I said, I do shrimp while I'm doing my fried green tomatoes. I actually prefer sauteed shrimp to go with my fried green tomatoes, which is just a perfect dinner for me. Like that is a absolutely perfect food. Remoulade sauce, fried green tomatoes, and some sauteed shrimp. But the remoulade sauce recipe will also be in the comments.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll include both of these recipes. Apparently, I'm going to be including a book list because we talked
Yeah.
about quite a few books today. Um, Final thoughts.
Oh, uh, so I have some questions for you
Okay.
about the movie. So if we had all of these characters in the modern day and you found out that they were in jail, what are they in jail for? And it can't be murder and it can't be cannibalism. So let's do
Hmm.
Iggy. What is Iggy in jail for?
Jaywalking.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, what's Ruth in jail for today?
Ruth is in jail
Girl,
today. Oh gosh.
just church going,
I
doesn't bother
know.
anybody.
Terrible.
But she's got like for a little while you're watching the movie, you're like, did Ruth find a way to kill him? Like she could have.
The the who done it of this film is really interesting because it's really you're led to believe it's Iggy the whole time.
Yeah, it would totally make sense.
Mhm. Again, 30-year-old movie. We're not going to spoil it for you. If you haven't seen it, we've just given you most of the information. Go watch it yourself and make fried green tomatoes and all right.
Yeah.
Well, y'all, this has been amazing. Thank you for being here. Go out and have your own Tawanda movement.
Hmm.
What are you Tawanda'ing today?
I'm gonna try not to Tawanda onto people on the internet because generally my energy is better served kept to myself than Tawandaing onto people on the internet.
I agree. That's not worth anybody's time.
No, doesn't change anything
No.
like, except the level of my irritation.
No, and there's no insurance for the internet either. You can't like boast about having better insurance.
True.
All right, folks. Thank you so much for being here today, y'all. This has been an amazing time. What are we talking about next time? Did we decide?
A Knight's Tale.
Oh, that's right. We're talking about A Knight's Tale.
Yeah, I have done so much ridiculous historical research on this very anachronistic movie that is entirely unnecessary, and you're not going to hear most of it, but I just want you to know that I have done a lot.
I'm looking forward to hearing about it. We'll line up some good guest
Yeah.
hosts for that one. It'll be amazing. All right, folks, thank you so much for being here today. We will include the recipes, we will include the book notes. You can find all of that over on neurodiversitymedianetwork.com. And we will see you next time. Thanks for being here today. Bye.